In today's video, we're going to be looking at root stems and leaves and what they do for us as far as the plants go. So we're first going to start from the bottom up. We're going to look at roots. And what roots do are three different things. They're going to help anchor the plant so they're sturdy in the soil. They're going to help absorb any nutrients or water that are also in the soil. And they're going to help store food. Some of the food that we eat, such as carrots, are going to be a root itself. Now, as far as the different root types go, there are two main types. We have fibrous roots and we have tap roots. The difference between them is that fibrous roots have many short roots. If you've ever pulled up grass before, they have a whole bunch of roots they look like strings attached to the bottom of them. Those are our fibrous roots, as opposed to tap roots, which have one big root to them, like a carrot would be a tap root. Now, some other examples besides grass and carrots that we can use to look at is that fibrous roots have grass, corn, and onion as their examples. If you ever look at the bottom of an onion at the store, you can see some of the roots that are left behind. As tap roots, we have things as carrots. If you ever weeded a garden, dandelion weeds are a very common type of tap root, and cactus. A cactus is a type of taproot as well. Now, the structure of the roots, they have different parts to them. The first thing is what's called a root cap. This is at the very end of the root, and what it serves is to protect the root as it's digging in the soil. So in case it comes up with like a rock or something and it rams itself into it, it's not actually damaging the part that's going to help absorb the water or the nutrients or the part that continues to grow. It's kind of a protective helmet at the end of it. We also have root hairs, which help absorb the water and nutrients. They come off of it. They're little kind of branches on the root. Now, throughout the talk about stems, roots, and leaves, we're going to talk about things called vascular tissue, which we talked about the other day in class. Now, vascular tissue is mainly used as transport in all these different cases, and the vascular tissue in this case is going to be located in the center of the root. Now, we remember we have two types of vascular tissue. We have xylem with the X, which is going to transport water, and we have phloem, which is going to help transport our food. In the next part here, we're going to look at stems. And the purpose of stems is that they help transport either the water from the roots to the leaves, or they help transport the food that is made in the leaves down to the roots. So they're involved with a lot of transport. The second thing is that they help support the leaves so that they can get closer to the sunlight. Now, there are two types of major stems. We have the herbaceous and we have the wooded. Now, the difference between them is that the herbaceous isn't made of wood. They are soft. These are your typical type of flowering plants that you would be able to, see on a daily basis. Most of the plants in your garden are probably going to be of your herbaceous variety. Like your pepper plants and stuff like that. Whereas your wooded stems are going to be very hard and rigid, so these would be like maple trees or any other type of trees that actually have a wood to them. Now, with wood itself, there's different layers of wood. We obviously have the bark, and the bark is divided into two different sections. We have the outer bark, which protects all the living cells inside of the tree. We then have what's called the inner bark, which is the living phloem, the stuff that's going to transport the food back and forth. Inside of that layer, inside of the inner bark, we have the cambium layer, which produces new phloem and new xylem. So it produces new vascular tissue, in other words. We also have sapwood going further inside. And the sapwood is where a lot of the active transport is actually going to be happening. Where you got your water and your minerals moving left and right, up and down, throughout the different parts of the stem. And then in the very middle of the wood, you actually get your heartwood, the solid, rigid layer in the middle there. Which is just going to be, it's the older stuff. It's no longer currently doing any transport. So its main job now is to support the tree. Now, one special thing about wooded stems is obviously their rings. If you cut a tree down, you'll see the rings on the inside. What these are called are their annual rings, because what they measure is year-to-year growth of the tree. The darker sections are the xylem tissue, the stuff that's going to transport water in the stuff that's going to transport water in the tree. And basically what the rings do, you can count them and obviously know how old the tree is, but you can also measure the distance from one ring to the other, and that distance is going to mean whether or not it was a good growing season for the tree or a poor growing season for the tree. So the larger the distance in between each ring, the more water the tree got during that year. And it basically equates to tree growth, in other words. So that basically wraps up our conversation about stems. Our last part that we're going to talk about today is the leaf. And the leaf's main purpose is to capture sunlight and do the process of photosynthesis. Now the structure of the leaf is divided into two parts. We have the upper leaf, which is going to be the part that's going to trap the sunlight, and we have the lower leaf, which is where photosynthesis is going to be happening at. Now, much like always, we have xylem and phloem in the leaf as well. Remember that xylem carries the water and the phloem carries the food. Both of these parts, though, make up the veins that are in the leaf. The veins are the little lines that you can see inside of the leaf itself. Now, one extra part to the leaf that allows it to carry out the photosynthesis that it does is the stomata, which allows for the carbon dioxide to come into the plant, and it allows for the oxygen to leave the plant. They are little tiny pores or holes throughout the leaf that allow this transfer of gases to occur. Carbon dioxide in, oxygen out. Now, photosynthesis is going to be one of the major parts of what the leaf does. A leaf is able to do this because of the chloroplasts inside of each one of the cells. These chloroplasts, much like we talked about during the cellular unit, is going to be the thing that allows it to carry out photosynthesis. More specifically, inside of the chloroplast is a chemical called chlorophyll. This is where really all the major stuff is going to go down in. Now, the process of photosynthesis itself works in two ways. What it's going to do is it's going to take carbon dioxide, which it gets from the air, it's going to take water that it absorbs through the roots, and it's going to take sunlight, which it gets from the leaf itself. And it's going to change that and transform it into sugar, which we call glucose, and oxygen, which it then releases to the air around them. So essentially what it takes is these three different parts that gets transported to the leaf from different locations and turns it into sugar and oxygen. So once again, that process is carbon dioxide, which it gets from the outside. It absorbs that in through the stomata. It's going to get the water from the roots, transport all the way up to the leaves, and it's going to get sunlight, which the leaves are going to trap in the upper portion of the leaf, and it's going to turn that into sugar and oxygen. Now, one last thing that goes along with our root stem and leaves is the difference between what we call a monocot and a dicot. Now, these are a part of a specific group of plants called the angiosperms, and we kind of talked about this the other day, earlier in class, with the cotyledon, which is the food source for the embryo. Now we have the monocot, which cotyledon is the cot part of it, and we have mono, which means one. It's the prefix mean one. So the difference between the actual word monocot and dicot itself is that we have monocots, meaning that it has one seed leaf inside of it, or one food source inside of it, whereas a dicot is provided with two seed leaves or food sources inside of it. Now, the reason why we're bringing up the difference between a monocot and a dicot is the fact that their root, stem, leaves, and even their flowers are going to be different from one another. So for the notes, we're going to take a look at monocots first and then dicot second. We have the seeds, first off, for monocots. They have one cotyledon, as the name suggests. Monocot, one cotyledon. We have the leaves of the plants are going to be parallel, meaning that they're going to line up side by side each other. And then we're going to have the stems, which inside the stem they're going to have the vascular tissue scattered everywhere. So their xylem and phloem are just everywhere within the stem. There's no real pattern to where they're going to be found. The flowers themselves are going to be grouped into groups of 3 by their petals. And then the roots for the monocot are going to be fibrous, meaning that they're going to have the multiple ones that are out there. Now for dicots, di means 2, so they're going to have 2 cotyledons. The leaves of them are going to be branching veins. The stems are going to have their vascular tissue in a ring, meaning that they're going to be in a ring structure. The flower petals are going to be arranged in either groups of 4s or groups of 5s. Finally, the root is going to be a taproot, like our carrot example from earlier. So those are the difference between a monocot and a dicot plant.